This morning, though, I do want to get back into this biblical equation for success. I want to deal with the formula that we were building last week. And as we get into this morning, I can't spend as much time as I did last week on the topic, but I do want to quickly get through it. So I want to dig back into this equation this morning. So last week, we had put a basic math equation. So for all the mathematicians, as I mentioned last week, you're going back to math class. For those that don't like math, sorry. However, this is a simple algebra math equation. So if you weren't here last week, that's why you need to pick up the CD from last week to catch up. But I am going to go through it again this morning. So in this equation, this is a simple algebra equation that in order to get x, to get the answer x in this algebra equation, we have to find out y and z, and then we have to multiply that times 7. Simple, right? So this 7 in the equation is vital. It's the foundation to the equation. It's called the constant. In a mathematical algebra equation, these two are variables. This 7 is called a constant. It doesn't vary. It doesn't change. It never has a different number to replace it with. It is a constant in the equation to solve x. Fair enough? Okay. That constant in our lives, to this equation, we're trying to build biblical success. How many want success? How many want to experience biblical success? As I mentioned last week, not worldly success. A car you drive, the house you live in, those are all secondary to biblical success. Biblical success starts with a constant. The biblical equation to success starts with a constant. You cannot build anything else into this equation. You will never figure out x if you do not have this 7 given to you in the equation. For us, this constant in our lives as believers must be love. The constant in the equation to biblical success must be love. This constant in our lives must be this agape love. Agape love, which is a love for mankind. It is an unconditional love. It has no change. It has no vary. It is not based on emotion. It is an unconditional love that comes from the Father. If we want to experience success, we have got to start with the constant in this equation being an agape love as the foundation of our lives. If we want to govern our families properly, if we want to protect and raise our children appropriately, if we want to be effective in fortifying our families, if we want to make a difference in our culture and our communities, the equation will only work when love is properly provided and active in our lives. Now, we cannot replace this constant. I cannot take in this equation and change this number from 7 to 6. It won't work. As I mentioned last week, if we were using a simple equation here for a taxi cab ride, we would be told the constant in the equation would be the charge per hour. So $7 per mile, $7 per mile is the constant in the equation. The Y and Z vary. The Y and Z are miles and days. You have to determine how far you're traveling. How many miles is that? How many days are you doing that? You have to take the Y and the Z. They vary. You could be going it for 1 day, 1 month. You could be taking it 10 miles or 50 miles. But those vary. What doesn't vary is the constant, and you cannot change this to a 6. You can't change this to a 3. You can't pick your favorite number 1 and make that in the constant in the equation because it won't work. You cannot change the constant love, an agape love in the equation in order to be success. You can't replace that with an eros love. You can't replace that with a philia love or a storge love. Those are natural loves. You can't replace it with a conditional one, an earned one, an emotional one. None of those can replace an agape love in order to build success. We can't change the value of the constant. Now, the only way that we can ensure that we have that right constant in our lives is if we have received it properly. It is only capable to function with the constant love in our lives, and agape love, is if we have received it properly from the Father, from the head. Because if you don't receive it properly from the head, the Father, then it's impossible for us to put it into the equation because it becomes conditional. The Father in heaven is an agape love. That love is unconditional. And it's two sides to the coin. The way we receive it from the Father, when we flip that coin, that's how we give it out. That love is given out. So if we don't receive it properly, then we can't give it out properly. We must receive it from the Father, and that agape love must be in our lives in order to flow through us to others. Now, this morning we're going to make a shift. We're going to shift to the other two parts of this equation, the variables. Now, in this equation, we need them in order to prove the example. In order to get the right answer, we need to figure out these variables in the equation. Now, as I mentioned, they're not the same. They vary. In our lives, they vary also. However, in the equation, the miles are still the miles. What varies is how far you're traveling, right? What varies is how many days you're traveling that. In our lives, these variables, they change, but they're still the same. You need them in order to be success. So what I want to do is I want to give you the first variable this morning that we need in order to have success. When we take this next variable, this first variable in our lives, and we multiply that with love, we're building a formula for success. That first variable in our lives is serve. Serve. We must apply serving to the equation. See, when serving is brought into the equation with love, it's multiplied in with the constant of love. This is the next part of having success. Serving, can I say this, church? Serving is unequivocally, indisputable, unarguable, a necessity in the equation for biblical success. Now, it varies in application. How you serve varies. But you need to serve. Where you serve here at Calvary, whether you're in the usher team, whether you're in security, whether you're in hospitality, on the worship team, in Kids Wing, it doesn't matter where you serve, but you're serving. It varies in the equation, but you need to serve. And I want to stop there for just a minute because I'm going to come down your street if you're not serving. And it's not a judgment on you. I'm not here to judge you and create any criticism of you. But I'm here to say that if you've been here for a while and you're not serving in some level or capacity in your church, you might struggle having biblical success. Because you can't remove this from the equation. You must serve in your local church. You must serve outside your local church. You have outside missions where you serve, whether you serve the homeless, whether you serve the fatherless, the unborn, the less fortunate. It varies, but it's needed in our lives in order to complete the equation and experience biblical success. See, serving's not about me. Serving's about you. It takes the focus off of what I need, what I want, what I desire, and shifts the attention to what you want, you need, and you desire. You see, serving this way can only be done when biblical love is properly in the equation, when it's an agape love. You can't serve others. You can't serve if you don't put agape love. You can't serve this way. You can't put others before you. You can't put others' feelings, needs, desires, and wants before yours if you're not starting with a constant of agape love. When serving gets properly multiplied in the equation, we can now build the formula for success. Serving is not a gift. It's a given. Serving's not a gift, it's a given. There is the greatest example of serving in Scripture found in a familiar passage. We have read this numerous times, but I think often we don't fully stop and understand the value of it. We don't understand. We don't take it from, as I mentioned last week, we don't take it from theory. We have the wisdom of it. We read it. We understand it. We're wowed by it. But we don't shift to shop. We don't shift to activating it in our lives. And I think sometimes we read the scripture verse and we just kind of read through and like, wow, Jesus was awesome. It's a story about Jesus in the upper room before they partook of the Last Supper. Jesus did something so crazy that the disciples were beside themselves. If you have your Bibles and you want to join me there, it's in the book of John, chapter 13. And it starts in verse 4. It says, he risen from supper. Jesus rose from supper, laid aside his garments. He took a towel and he girded himself. After he poured the water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel wherein he was girded. Then he comes to Simon Peter. And Peter says to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? I would have said the same thing. But Lord, you gonna wash my feet? Jesus answers Peter and he says this, what I do, you don't know right now, but you shall know after. Now, that's a crazy answer because it just confuses me. It would have confused me if I was a disciple and Jesus said that. But what do you mean after? Peter says to him, nah, Lord, you never wash my feet. That's just wrong. It's backwards. You shouldn't be washing my feet. Jesus answered him, and look at what Jesus says. If I wash you not, you'll have no part of me. See, Jesus is saying to Peter, you're starting to confuse the constant. You're starting to mistake agape love, the love I have for you. You think it's conditional, and you also don't understand that serving needs to be part of the biblical equation. I can't leave you if you don't understand how to serve. It's a variable. I'm not going to wash your feet after service. I'm not going to get a basin, sit here at the altar, and wash every one of your feet as you go by. I also would say this. Many times we read this and we all want to hear these words, well done, my good and faithful pastor. Oh, well done, my good and faithful businessman. Well done, my good and faithful, rich, wealthy son or daughter. Jesus makes it a point to say, well done, my good and faithful servant. Because you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven without knowing him. And if you know him and you know his love from the Father, you should be giving it out with an agape love. And that constant multiplied with the equation of serving, now we're building success. Now we can enter the kingdom of heaven. If you slide down a couple of verses into verse 12, it says, after he washed the feet, he taken his garments, set them down again, and he said, know you what I have done to you? Verse 13, he says, you call me master and Lord, and you say it well, for I am. You got that part of the equation. You see who I am. You understand that I am master. If I then, your Lord, your master, have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. Serve one another. For I have given you an example. He's taken the wisdom and the knowledge, he's applying it now and saying you can't just have love, you got to now take it to action. You as a disciple must serve. And I'm giving you that example of what I have done for you. You should also do unto others. What was the significance of Jesus washing the feet of the disciples? It has significance in three ways. Number one, for Jesus, it was a display of his humility, his servanthood, and his love. He was putting on a display. He was formulating the equation for success. through his humility, his servanthood, and his love. For his disciples, the washing of the feet was in a direct contrast to their heart at that time. They were arguing who would betray Jesus. They were arguing about different things, and there was conflict. And Jesus was dealing by washing their feet, saying, got the wrong love. You got a philia love here. You got a love that's based on your friendships, based on your relationships with your co-disciples. You got the wrong love. Your hearts are wrong. You need a heart transplant. You need to go back to the Father. Make sure you're receiving the love properly so that you can give it out. Because if you were receiving it properly, you would be giving it out by serving. For us, the third significance was for you and I. Washing feet is a symbolic of our role in the body of Christ. It puts serving others as significantly higher than ourselves. It varies how we serve, varies the areas we serve, but guess what, church? We must serve. I mean, think about that. Walking in the sandals in Palestine, they didn't have Reebok. They didn't have Air Jordans, Skechers. They walked around in sandals. Those feet were nasty. When Jesus rose from the table and began to wash their feet in verse 4, he was doing the work of what would have been considered the lowliest of servants. The disciples must have been stunned at the act of humility and service, that their Lord and Master was washing their feet. But in Isaiah 53, when Jesus came to the earth, he came not as a king, not as a conqueror, but as a servant. And he revealed in his own words, he came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. The humility expressed by the Lord's act of service with a towel and a basin foreshadowed his ultimate act of humility and love on the cross. Can I just say this? Humility keeps in step with serving. They work hand in hand. They're locked together. Humility continues, serving with humility, they go hand in hand because it continues to remind us it's not about us. It's not about what he can do for me, but rather what I can do for you. Make sense? See, that's why the Bible says God resists the proud, but gives what? Grace to the humble. I'm a believer. I am a firm believer that there has been grace given, more grace given to those who have humility, who serve alongside with humility and have the right love and have this equation functioning properly in our lives. I believe there's an extra level of grace. Because when it's not about you and it's truly about a love, I believe there's extended grace in our lives. That's just my opinion. I also believe that it's ironic that as much as I think humility goes in step with serving, I think pride goes in step with sin. What's crazy to me is that in that word pride, there's a letter I smack dap right in the middle. And it's supposed to be a little I. But when pride starts to rise up, that I starts to stand tall. It becomes a capital I. It stands above everything in that word. And when pride starts to rise up in our lives, guess what follows? Sin. Guess what letters right smack dab in the word of sin? That same letter I. They work in step together. Pride cometh before the fall. As his followers, we're to emulate Christ by serving one another in lowliness of heart and mind, seeking to build one another up through an agape love. I love Galatians 5:13. It says, "For brethren, you have been called unto liberty." That word liberty means freedom. You've been called to freedom. You've been liberated. Don't use this freedom, this liberation, for an occasion to feed the flesh. Don't use what I did on the cross for your own gain. Pastor John said it earlier. Everything's to flow through you. The love is designed not to stop at you. It's designed to flow through you. And he says this, don't use liberty for an occasion of the flesh, but by love, serve. By love, serve one another. By love, serve one another. They are hand in hand with one another. You must serve, multiply to an agape love in order to start building success. Otherwise, everything that follows, as we mentioned last week, is nothing. It means nothing. You could serve, but it doesn't start with a constant of love. It means nothing. True greatness in his kingdom is attained by those with a servant's heart. Read Mark 9:35 and 10:44. When we have a servant's heart, the Lord promises in John 13:17 that we're greatly blessed. The equation is starting to make sense. When you put these things into the equation of life, that you are starting to build success, biblical success. Romans 12:9 and 10. Love must be sincere, honest, pure, agape. It must be agape. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another. Be committed to one another in that agape love. Honor one another above yourselves. Serve one another above yourselves. When you serve, you honor them. You're helping them. You honor them. When you serve, you honor God. Honor one another above yourselves. Philippians 2:3, the warning from Paul now comes and says, by the way, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. There's that instep again. In humility, value, serve. When you serve someone, you're showing value and honor to them. When we serve God, we show value and honor to Christ. We represent him. The Bible's telling us that humility is in step with serving. In humility, value above others above yourself. I want to share something with you this morning that many people have said to my wife and I over the years. You know, Pastor Sam, you and Jackie have a gift of service. And can I be honest with you? That's a bunch of crap. Sorry, did I say that? Pastor John said some worse things than that. Serving's not a gift. It's a given. Serving is not a gift. It isn't something God puts down on Sam and Jackie, on Pastor Ken and Pam. It's not a gift. It's a given. If you represent the King, if you've received his love, serving is a given. It has to be in the equation. Otherwise, it won't work. Oh, sure, there's gifts. The gift of hospitality. I've been to some people's house. They don't have the gift. If you've been to my house, we got that gift. There's the gift of helps. There's the gift to teach, to heal. There's many gifts in the body, but serving others or serving is not a gift. It's supposed to be a given. Serving others is a must. Otherwise, the equation won't ever work. Now, one problem is that we tend to attach something to serving. See, we put expectation when we serve. We tend to say, well, I'll serve with the intention of getting something back. This is not what the scripture says. It doesn't read treat others how you want to be treated, comma, and expect that in return. See, when we do that, when we put expectation in serving others, we do it out of selfish gain. Personal. What can I get out of this? And what we're doing is, and we mentioned this last week, we're beginning to build an equation of vanity or vain gain. Because when we try to change the type of love and put that into the equation, and we want to see success in our lives, and we now put this variable in, and we say, well, I am serving, but I got a motive. We're building an equation for vanity, not biblical success. Now, this concept of serving your church and serving others is contradictory to today's world. It really is. I mean, in today's world, society looks much different. We have high-paid power positions, CEOs, presidents, that display a different concept. They display do you know who I am? I mean, do you know who I am? I am the president of this organization. And rather than, as a president, be thankful and grateful for the employees you have, and how can I serve you to make you a better you, they take a posture or position of how can you serve me? When I walk in the room, you ought to bow. We have presidents of the United States, and by the way, both parties, because I don't serve either one. We serve the King of Kings. And we have presidents on both sides of the platform that are concerned more about what they can get out of the people rather than serve the people. And that isn't what it was designed to do. You were designed to serve. People say these high-powered people, they got a God complex. Are you nuts? That ain't no God. That's not the God I serve. If they had a God complex, they'd be serving their people. We're consumed with this. Athletes, actors. I mean, they expect us to wash their feet. Do you ever run into an actor or an athlete in a restaurant? My God, they got people around them. I don't even know why they go out. They got people around them. You can't get to them. You can't say hello to them. Who do they think they are? And they want us to serve them. They're not taught this. See, they're not taught this. They're taught because I have power. Because I have prestige, you serve me. I read an article, and I'm only sharing it for one reason, because I was preparing for this message, and I happened to be just scrolling through some stuff in my downtime, and God has a funny way of showing you things. And I read an article, the guy from Godfather, what's his name, Al Pacino. He's 85, 82, somebody knows the article. He's 82 and he's gonna have a baby. Well, he's not having a baby. His 29-year-old girlfriend is. That's another message. But anyways, Al Pacino said this. He said, he has multiple kids. And he said, I love having kids. He said, because you know what? He goes, it keeps me remember. He goes, because I go out and everybody serves me. And when I fly home from a set and I see my kids, guess what? It ain't about me no more. I have to serve them. I'm not used to that. And it keeps me somewhat aware of the joy of when I come home, I have to serve. And we in our lives have to make sure that we don't get caught up in this. Sadly, this has spilled over into the equation in church. Because I find it amazing that in the 21st century, we have churches and individuals who care more about what they can gain rather than what they can give. What can I get out of this? If I develop a relationship with you, what can I get out of this? If I help serve you, what can I get out of this? What can I gain rather than what can I give? And we're starting to put the wrong equation together. The mode is wrong. I'm amazed that church members spend more time pointing people out rather than picking people up. I've been a pastor since 2009. I want to tell you, I've had so many people come in my office and tell me everything wrong with someone else. You know, Pastor Sam, can I talk with you for a minute? I need some counsel. Sure, what's up? I mean, did you see the outfit so-and-so was wearing? I mean, Pastor Sam, did you hear what that person said in the foyer? Oh, this person said this to me, and I'm offended by that. And I think this person is saying this, and I think the church should do this, and they spend more time pointing out everything. Can I tell you this? I don't think I can remember once anybody sitting down in my office and saying, Pastor Sam, how can I serve them? I have a conflict. How do I help serve them? What can I do? What can I pray for? How would I deal with this? How can I help them become a better them? How can I serve them and be an assistance to them? Serving is a must. It needs to be implemented into this formula in order to have biblical success. So, the equation is half completed. We've established that to be successful, to experience biblical success, we know that the constant in the equation must be an agape love. The next part of the equation, or the variable now, is serving. It changes, it varies, but you must serve. If we want to experience success, we must serve with an agape love. Now, this next one that we're going to apply, which will conclude and finish the equation for success, is one of the hardest ones, I think, to apply into the equation. One of the hardest ones for people to do, and here it is: change. Change. Now, I'm not talking about definitive change. I'm not talking about something that you or I can't stop. The weather, seasons, aging. I mean, aging we can try to shorten, put a little nip, a little tuck, a little cut, a little dye. I dye my hair in case you haven't never noticed. One day you see me gray, the next day you see me brown. But like I said last week, when you look in that mirror, you deceive yourself because you think you look young. And when you walk away, guess what? You're still getting old. But these are unchangeable events that happen regardless of what we do. We can't stop them. Nothing we do can stop that change. What I'm talking about this morning in this equation is purposeful change, a course correction, an about face, one that triggers a tangible change in our lives. A change that, when multiplied by a constant of love, brings success in our lives. Again, it varies. We need change. Just like up here, we need to know the days. We're not changing it to gas. We're not changing it to the location. We're not changing any of that. It's still days, but it varies. Here, it's still change. It's got to be change, and it may vary. It's not the same for everyone. The change that needs to happen in my life is not the same the change that needs to happen in Pastor Danny's life, in Dave's life. It's different. What we need to change, how we need to change, the things we need to change, the things God's calling us to do, to change, to step out in faith, they vary. But they are needed in our lives in order to experience success. This is one of the hardest things for people to do, is change, to make adjustments. It's very hard for people to do because that pride rises up. And I believe this is why so many believers don't experience the success they desire. Because we don't like change. We fight change. So we try to take it out of the equation. We try to remove it from the equation and just say, okay, well, if I'm going to be successful, I mean, I love God. I understand his love. I got that. I'm serving in the church. I think I'm doing it pretty unselfish. But change? You want me to make an adjustment? You want me to do something different? Can I leave that out of the equation? No, you can't. You must change. Listen, I'm one of the biggest violators of this because I don't like change. I'm a kind of guy, if it ain't broken, don't fix that thing. Pastor John will tell you, I mean, sometimes he comes because he's a visionary, man. He's always thinking to the next level. He's always thinking like we could start to, and he's looking at things further. And he's like, we should probably make a change. I'm like, change? Come on. I'm like, come on, Pastor John. Change again? I'm like, man, can't we just keep doing what's working great? But a willingness or a posturing ourselves to change is absolutely needed to experience success. We cannot remove change from the formula. It won't work. You know, when I was first got married and I was younger, I had I was younger, 28 years, that beautiful lady. When I was younger and I was first married, I was a little wild and crazy for the Miami Dolphins. For those of you who don't know the Miami Dolphins, it's a football team. And I was really crazy about Dan Marino. And if you don't know who he is, you missed out on the best quarterback that ever played the game. See? Truth. But when I was younger, and I just got married, and I had gotten saved, and in case you didn't know, I didn't come out of my mother's womb as a pastor. So when I was younger and I was so involved in football, I was a crazy, fanatical human being, beyond you could ever imagine. I mean, I used to dress up every Sunday as Dan Marino. I used to wear the home gear when they were playing home and put on the away gear when they were away. Pastor Ken said, wow, you haven't even heard it yet. I wear the helmet, the eye black, a football in my arm. When Dan Marino went back to pass, I go back to pass with him. He'd throw a pass, I'd catch it. If he caught a touchdown, I'd go through my wife will tell you, I'd go through the front door. And there was a little bush I had in the front yard, I'd tackle it. We named our dog Marino. I told my wife I wanted to name my first kid Dan. So when I opened the door, I could say, Dan Marino, come on. We got married on the 13th. That was his number. We went on our honeymoon for 13 days. I invited him to my wedding. He didn't answer, by the way. I had a room in my basement in our first home that was the man cave, beyond man caves. I had a dolphin logo in the middle of the carpet. The room was painted aqua, orange, and white. I had a banner all the way around the room of the Miami Dolphins. I had a bar in the basement. The top was custom made as the dolphin. And the tail used to go up and down to get behind it. One day, I'm watching Dan Marino, Sunday. My wife isn't feeling good. I got all the other knuckleheads with me in the house, and we're watching football. My friend takes my wife to the doctor. She's not feeling well. My wife gets a pregnancy test, unbeknownst to me, because I was a bozo, paying no attention to it. So my buddy comes out of the hallway and he goes, oh, Sam, you should go see Jackie. I'm like, why, what's up? Hold on a second, man, he's throwing the football. So I do the whole thing and I'm like, all right, where is she? I go down the hallway, I go in the room, my wife's sitting on the edge of the bed. She's crying. And I said, well, look, picture this. I got a helmet on. I got eye black on my face. I'm dressed like Dan Marino. I said to my wife, what's the matter, honey? She goes, I'm pregnant. And look at you. You're so not ready to be a father. I said, we could do this. I made a change. If I didn't make that change, I wouldn't be up here 28 years later. And if I could be a bit bold with you this morning, anyone not willing to change is stubborn, selfish, arrogant, and prideful. And when this is active and we're not willing to put change into the equation of success, to be the man and woman of God that he's called us to be, to have success in our lives, when we don't do that, we're not willing to do that, here's what we do. We complete the equation of vanity by saying this: God, here's the variable. I control the direction of my life. I'll do what I want to do. I'll do it the way I want to do it. It'll be my way. And we take and either manipulate this variable and do it our way, and all we do is build vanity. Selfish gain has no value in our lives. It isn't going to heaven with us, and we're not going to heaven, as I mentioned last week, that, you can't take any of this stuff with you. You can build all the empires you want. It ain't going with you if it isn't an agape love, if you're not serving others, and you don't make adjustments in your life in order to serve and change to experience success. 2 Chronicles 7:14 says this: if my people, which are called by my name, if you are called by his name, raise your hand, shall humble themselves, pray, seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways. Turn, an about face, change, make something different, do something different. If you'll make that adjustment, if you make that change and you put it into the equation, multiplied through an agape love, you'll experience success. Then God will hear from heaven, forgive your sins, heal and bless your land. Change is needed. Now, there are two things that are required in order to execute change. These two things are required in order for you to execute change in your lives. Here they are. The first one, choices. Choice. We have to choose to change. The one thing that God will never take away from you or I is our free will. We have to choose to change. We have to make a decision. If we want the current situation to be different, if you desire to see things change and stop hindering you, then you have to make the choice to change. See, you could change and not grow, Pastor Tom, but you cannot grow without change. It's impossible to develop, grow, experience success without change. But you can change and never grow. You could sell your house, move to another house. Sure, the address will change, but if your old house was a cluttery mess, your new one will likely become the same thing. If you had a bad marriage in the old house, I hear people say all the time, well, we want a new start. We want a fresh start, so we're moving to South Carolina. Guess what? If you don't make changes in your marriage, nothing's going to happen. You're going to go to South Carolina, and it's coming with you without deliberate change. If your dating experiences haven't gone well, make a choice to change it. You have to choose to change it. The ABCs we choose a choice on. These are what I call the ABCs that we choose, or how we base a choice on. The thoughts that our minds do when we think about if we're going to make a change, if we're going to choose to change. Here's the thoughts. A, can I do it? B, what's the risk? And C, what's the benefit? So this is the thought process that most of us have when we think about choosing to change. Can I do it? Is this even possible? I mean, if I want to be an astronaut, I know all things are possible through God, but I'm just saying, if I want to be an astronaut or a doctor, do I have what it takes? Is it possible? Do I have what it takes to make this change? B, what's the risk? What's this going to cost me? What are people going to think if I make this choice to change? What are they going to say about me? What are they going to think about me, my family? What are they going to think when I decide that I want to go into seminary school? People are going to think I'm nuts. What's the risk? Is it worth the change? And see, what's the benefit? If I make this change, and I choose to make this change in my life, and I think the risk is worth it, how will it profit me? Is the pain worth the gain? Is the pain of the risk, is the pain of the choice worth the gain that I might receive out of it? What's the advantage to changing? We must make the choice, though, to change, church. And the second thing that's required to execute change, the first one is choosing to do it. The second one to execute change is relationship. Relationship. See, in order to execute change, we must evaluate the relationships we have. I had to stop running around like an idiot. I had to evaluate the relationships that I had. And most of those people that I stopped hanging around with are divorced today. They're bound with gambling. They're bound with addictions of drugs and alcohol. Because they didn't decide to make a change, I did. I chose to change, and in order to make that change, I had to evaluate my relationships. I had to change something around. I started hanging around with the right people. You have to hang around with the right people if you want to execute change. Some of us need to change the groups we're hanging around with, the people we're hanging around with. We used to, for years, many of you know Turning Point, for years, over a decade, I sat on the board of Turning Point. And in that, it's a drug and alcohol rehabilitation program. And one of the things we consistently saw and we taught was change the people you hang around with, change the environment. Most people fall because when they're safe when they're in the home, they're safe when in their garden. They're around the people that create change. When you leave that and you go back to the same environment and you go back to the same people, you get triggered, and most people fall during that time. We've talked to people who are formerly drug addicts. Like, I can't even go down that street. I can't go anywhere near that people, that group of people, that sports bar, that place over here. I don't even go anywhere near that anymore. Why? Because they don't want to fall. They made a choice to change, and they evaluated their relationships, changed who they hung around with, and they made the choice to change. Can I say this? Intention without action is just a dream. Intention without action is just a dream. It's like a car without keys. Like, you can get in the car, turn the wheel, push on the gas pedal. Do you ever have little kids? My nieces used to love to get in the car, stand on the seat, and just steer the wheel. Their intention is to drive, but it's just a dream. Unless we put those keys in the ignition and turn it on and do the action, it'll never become a reality. It's impossible, church, to fortify your family, to cover your family, to lead your family, to nurture your family without change. It's impossible to do that if we don't make adjustments in how we calculate success. If you want to fortify your family, your marriages, your children, your relationships, the culture you're around, then change must be implemented to the equation. We do, my wife and I have been doing, and our church does, for anybody who wants to get married, we do pre-marriage counsel. And we do this great book on preparing for marriage. It's a long series. It's a very vigorous course, 12 sessions, 12 weeks of preparing for marriage. It's all about change. The whole curriculum is based on these three things. It's about change, because it's not about changing the person you're going to be married to. It's about you changing in order to be a helpmate, a covering, to fortify your family. You change, and when you change, you get success. The marriage begins to have success. The foundation of it all, it begins with love. We start this book. We start this whole series on love and agape love. We start with the history, the background, where you're from, because that has everything to do with how you view love. If they don't have the right view because of their upbringing, because of the way they were raised, they have the wrong view of God, then when they give it out, they bring it into the marriage. So we deal with love. We deal with the initial onset of how you were raised, what's your backup, what's your life like before you're getting into this marriage. Because if there's some identifiers that you're not really seeing love the right way, when you begin to walk into this marriage, you're starting with the wrong constant. If you create an eros love, an erotic love, and you think that's what's going to make this marriage work, after the honeymoon, it'll die out. You got to use a constant of love. We also then move to the second part of it in this premarital. It's about serving. We do this whole thing on great expectations. And the whole concept of how you are going into the marriage, what do you expect from your spouse? How are you going to serve? How are you going to serve your spouse the right way? Is it going to be through love, or is it going to be done from a selfish agenda? And it's all about change. If we want to have success in our marriages, in our families, then you must love right, you must serve them, and you must change to become a better you. I believe, my whole heart, that this is the biblical equation for success. Stand with me this morning.